Warning. Listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
The 4-Hour Work Week. Incredible book by Timothy Ferriss. Great strategies. Great tactics for changing the way that you do things, for changing the way to get back time, to get back the with your health and your family and all the things that you really strive to be successful for. But I can tell you, a lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, when we get started and even years into our journey, it's more like we're after the 4-hour sleep night than we are after the 4-hour work week, because there are so many extra things that get piled on besides what we're just passionate about that we feel that we need to do. And oftentimes the thing that we had the passion for takes the back seat. And this isn't just for entrepreneurs. This is for professionals, people that even work for someone else, but have a passion, a real passion around what they are doing and what they are contributing to society, to others. And today we're going to talk about that with an incredibly smart lady, Morgan Giddings. And she gave up a lot to walk away and to help others find a way to get focused on their passion and not let all that other stuff consume them and take over. So stick around. We'll be right back with Morgan Giddings.
Don't miss a thing. Listen to and download past episodes, get show notes, resource lists, and leave feedback at influencersradio.com.
And we are back on Influencers Radio. And today I have to say that when I was first doing some research and investigation into our next guest, I was a little bit concerned about a dry and boring subject and interview, but I have got to say that I was completely wrong. In fact, completely backwards, because you'll find out why as I give you some of the background here on our guest, because today we have Morgan Giddings. All right. Morgan, she led a science lab working on the Human Genome Project. All right. And we're talking about, this included very important, topics at work on things like breast cancer. She has degrees in physics, computer science, and biochemistry, and a long list of others some that I don't even understand. So you can see where I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a party, right? In 2010, though, Morgan chose to walk away from her tenured professorship at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, to start helping people rekindle and unleash their passion and creativity in their work. All right. This happened with one email. I'm talking about an email that just completely, where she walked away from a 6-figure salary because of her disgust in what had become of the field and the way that science was being done in the modern age. Morgan, welcome to Influencers Radio.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, I am too. And let's go back over that. I mean, we're talking about, when I first think of somebody with degrees in computer science and biochemistry and physics, I'm thinking, well, those are 3 people wrapped into one that I want to have at my next party. Right?
Yeah, to sit in the corner and like write stuff in a little notebook at tiny little type. It
is. I could, at first I thought, what am I possibly even going to discuss with Morgan? I know absolutely zero. I've had people say, tell me that you want to talk about geography, and I say, I'm horrible at math, right? But I think what really, really resonates with me is how someone can seemingly kind of lose their mind and throw all that away in order to help someone that is what a lot of people think is contrary to what people with that kind of brain and that kind of science do, help people discover and unleash and rekindle passion and creativity in their work. I want to know
Yeah.
about how, this works. And one of the, when you emailed, we're talking about when people are tenured professors, I mean, that's guaranteed money. That's guaranteed salary, 6-figure salary that you completely, walked away from in an email. Now, all I can think about when I think about that is Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory with this long, undecipherable email. Was it that simple? Is that how you walked away with an email saying, I'm done?
It really was. I sent it to my departmental chairperson, who was my supervisor at the time, and also a few people above him. And I said, you know what? I can't put up with some of this stuff that's been going on here. And so I quit. See you later. I didn't have another job lined up at the time. I was actually running a lab of 16 people who were reporting to me at the time. And, but I was just at a point, I was at a breaking point. I had let it get to a point where I was disgusted with what was going on. And so I'd had enough. And I said, I quit. Up yours, basically.
Now, to follow up on that, the people that you worked with, the people that work for you, and they found out that you quit, they certainly probably thought, oh, Morgan, she's gone off to some even higher minded pursuits, something that's even, bigger. Was it secret? Is it government? Is it what? And when they found out that you left to help people to rekindle and unleash their passion and creativity, what was that response like?
For a lot of people in the sciences, it was almost like I had become a little bit of a traitor, or at least that I had somehow failed. That's a very common perception for people who leave at that kind of point in the career, that, oh, there must have been some failure. But it wasn't due to any failure I had had. I actually had more grant funding than most of my colleagues. I had a bigger lab than many of my colleagues. Things were going well. Our research was getting published. But so it wasn't a failure. It was really a disgust with exactly what we're talking about in the topic today, which is that when people get into science or any technical field like that, they do it because they're passionate about it. They do it because they're excited about learning about it and doing that thing. But then you get into a position like that tenured faculty job, and that passion gets crushed and killed and buried, and with it the creativity too. And then it's all gone, and you become this shell of a human being who's just going through the motions and checking off to-do lists every day and saying, how the hell did I get here? And I was becoming that, and I made that choice that I didn't want to become that anymore, and I didn't want to see other people become that either.
Yeah, I imagine that a lot of people don't think about that when they're deciding that I'm going to be a scientist. I'm going to be, and it doesn't have to be science. I guess really anything they have a passion about, this thing that they're drawn to, that they're called to as a career. But using science as an example, it probably doesn't enter their mind that, man, I'm going to be a scientist and I'm going to do big things, and I'm going to have to do inventory on tubes and what colors in the tops and what's all the little things you're talking about. The to-do list are things that were completely absent from that romanticized vision of what it was they were going to be doing. And oftentimes, I guess from talking to you, that can actually kind of overwhelm and consume their time and what they're doing, to the detriment of what really drove them there and their passion that they had for what they're doing. Is that right?
Yeah, and I see this both in science labs and in business as well. So it applies to both. But again, since we were talking about the science lab, I'll just give that example, which is that you go into the science lab saying, yeah, I'm going to be a scientist. Yay, I'm going to get to do experiments and find out, find a cure for cancer, or find this or do that. And then you get in there and you realize, okay, now I'm being asked to do all these committee meetings, and I'm asked to interview all these job candidates, and I'm asked to do all this paperwork, and I'm asked to do all of this financial management of the lab, and I'm asked to go out and get grant funding for the lab, and the list is just endless.
And I guess
so what happens? Yeah.
No, I guess that's how it parallels with entrepreneurs as well. When they think I'm going to open up this great business and do this great thing, but then it comes down to, but then I have to, get someone to, I got to do legal. I've got to do my taxes. I have to, clean the shop. I have to I have to do all this stuff that overwhelms them at all as a parallel. Well, where that stuff takes over from what it is that really drove them to do that.
Exactly. And once it takes over, for a little while, when you're getting something new started, getting a new business started or a new science lab started, there is a period of time where you have to take on some extra things. You have to be the head cook and bottle washer at the same time. But that should be a very short period. Unfortunately, what I see happening all around our world these days is this becomes a very prolonged and almost permanent thing for many people, where they get into their field and they study their field, they study their art, they have something awesome to offer to the world, and yet they get into this mode of like, I have to do everything, and soon enough they've lost that creativity, they've lost that passion, that genius that they had, and it's totally buried underneath this sea of overwhelm and sea of day-to-day stuff. And once that's gone, not only does it cause all the overwhelm and whatnot, but it also just completely unplugs any fun from that work that they're doing anymore. I mean, the people that I work with are unfortunately just usually they come to me when they're really not having a good time at work at all anymore.
Right. And I think the thing that really is, I think, genius about what you do, which is when we think of it, it's simple, but so many people miss it. But your ability to get in there and help folks with making that decision of, look, it's time to give some stuff up. It's time to hand some stuff off. Instead of handing off and giving up your creativity and your passion, let's hand off all that extra junk that you had to do to get the ball rolling, but that you no longer have to do. What is it that makes people hold on to that part of it rather than fight for that creativity and passion they have? What is it that makes people think that, I've got to scrub harder. I've got to, keep doing the books. I have to keep doing all this stuff that I have no desire or passion to do, to the detriment of why they really got into their field in the first place?
Well, it's a long answer, but I'll give the short version. The short version of it is that we have this perception in modern life that in order to be successful, it requires hard work. And we have taken this to an extreme. And whereas, this hard work, like if you looked at it 50 years ago, as an example, hard work might have been considered to be 50 hours per week. But it's like everybody looks at everybody else and says, well, they're working 50 hours per week, so I have to work 51 hours per week to do more than that person's doing. And then somebody else says, well, that person's working 51, I've got to work 52. And then the next person is doing 53. And so we've ratcheted up and up and up. So now the standard of hard work is more like 80, 90, 100 hours per week. And we've gotten to this point where the notion of, quote, hard work to succeed has become essentially insanity. And in this insanity of what we call hard work, there is just no room left for the creative genius that you started out with, because this creativity is actually something that can get overwhelmed and lost easily if you're not getting enough sleep and if you're not taking care of yourself. And so then once you stop expressing that, then what is it that helps you and your work and your business stand out in the world? Once that creative genius is gone, then you don't stand out. Then you look like everybody else in the world.
Right. And so, well, let's think about this. All right. This sounds good. All right. It sounds like, okay, this is the answer. That I need to stop doing this stuff in order to allow my creativity, my passion to come through. But, in my mind, in a lot of people's mind, it comes down to productivity versus creativity. It's great. I have this desire. I have these passions. I want to do this, but I've also got bills to pay. I've also got employees to pay. I've got, lights to keep on. And it seems like those are in direct conflict with each other. How do you reconcile that?
I reconcile it because those are two very different they're different modes of operation. So the stuff that you described is maintenance mode. This is a mode of operation where you're just making sure your systems are running. It's like if you buy a house, occasionally you're going to have to maintain the roof in order to make sure that it doesn't leak. But you're not, your goal in life, you're not getting paid to maintain your roof. You're not enjoying, the existence of the roof except for the fact that it keeps the rain out. But it's not like a focus for almost anybody except somebody who chooses to be a roofer, right? So, but it's as if we all go into our careers, and let's say you're a painter, just as a random example. You're a painter, you're sitting there in your house, and you decide, well, I also need to be a roofer, and I also need to be a plumber, and I also need to be an electrician, and I also need to do this and that and the other thing. And you get so involved in doing these other tasks that you forget about your ability to paint, and you never paint another brushstroke in your life. And yet the thing that drives each of us forward and that we get paid for in life is always our creative genius. If you think about great scientists, Albert Einstein as an example, he is somebody who is known to most of us because he was a creative genius. He changed the field of physics forever because of that his imagination, his creativity. If you think about Steve Jobs, he changed the field of mobile devices forever because of his genius, his passion, his creativity, not because of checking off his bills, his to-do list of bills and so on. Nobody gets paid for that maintenance stuff. None of us do. So yes, we have to do some of it, but we have to separate that out and understand that that's only one part of what we do. And that if we let that maintenance stuff take over, then we are toast. We are history. We are finished because then we are not doing the thing that actually brings the money in and brings the recognition in and moves us forward as leaders in our careers and in our businesses.
You bring up some good examples, and I'm wondering, did Einstein have a Morgan Giddings behind him to say, don't do that, do this? Because it's obviously something very difficult for people to get, it is something that almost, I think people can understand it. I think people that are listening right now, it's, they're having that V8 moment. Oh, this makes perfect sense. But it's something very difficult to actually, put into place. I know Einstein, he was at the extreme, he had, the same suits, 5 to 7 of the same suits to wear every day. So he wouldn't have to expend any energy on deciding what he was going to wear. So he could leave that for his creativity. He certainly, I would assume, didn't sit down to do his monthly budget and all of that things that people get consumed with. What is it when you're working with someone? Is there a certain point that you recognize that, they get it, or it's the switch is flipped, that then all of a sudden it just starts to unfold and it starts to happen? Do you recognize that when you see that when you're working with someone? Is it like instantaneous or something that happens quickly?
I'd say it's usually more of an incremental thing. I mean, when I'm working with somebody, I show them new ways of structuring their time and their day and new ways of setting goals and really accomplishing them powerfully. But each of these things are increments, because if I'm working with somebody, I have to overcome a often lifetime or at least decades or years of momentum that they have towards this mode of operating in too much work and too much overwhelm and not doing that one thing that they do best and getting it out in the world powerfully. So I see it as an incremental process. I have never seen anybody just flip on a dime. And in fact, this is true of myself. I was very overwhelmed during stages, and I had lost my sense of creativity and genius that I was bringing to my science, and that's a big reason that I left. And it has been a path of many steps to get to where I am now, where I don't have that problem very often at all. I'm occasionally overwhelmed, but it's pretty rare these days. And I'm very, I prize the balance and all of those things. But again, it didn't happen overnight. I wanted to also, though, go back to your mention of Einstein. Did he have a Morgan Giddings behind him? And as far as I know, he did not. But I think there are two factors in that. The first factor is it was a simpler time, and there weren't so many forces sort of leading towards overwhelm. There wasn't so much information and so much opportunity back then. So I think it was a little bit easier. I don't want to say a lot easier, but maybe a little bit. But the second thing is Abraham Maslow, in some of his work, he came up with the hierarchy of human needs. And in this hierarchy of human needs, he sort of listed that at the very bottom of the pyramid, there are the basic needs like, food and sex and air and water. And then, the next stage up is like social needs. And then there's the next stage up, which is more intellectual needs. And then, up at the very top of this pyramid are people who are self-actualized humans. And Einstein was one of those that he actually studied in his work as an example of a self-actualized human who is fully engaged in his creative genius. And these are the people who change the world, who make a big impact in whatever field they're in. They are the self-actualized people. Now, at the time, Maslow said, well, these are the rarest people because there are so few people that have all of the other levels of the pyramid met. But in our modern world, we have no reason, no excuse for not having all those other levels of the pyramid met, except for our own habits and our own momentum. There's not an excuse for most of us to not be self-actualized, except for these beliefs that we've adopted, that we have to work all the time and so on.
And you said that, when you bring up momentum, all right, obviously momentum starts somewhere, and you talk about the way that we, the way that we think, and it's been embedded to us. And I guess it goes back to childhood. When we spoke earlier, you said something that we didn't go deep into, but, about, kids, I guess, when from school age, right, where this may set off that track, or this may set off that, the trajectory of discouragement even, or maybe lack of encouragement for creativity, right? Or an emphasis put on the importance of creativity. And I didn't think about it when we were talking about this before we came on to do this interview, but I started thinking about my own kids and how that I've been sending home grades where they got a poor grade, not because they didn't know the answer. The answer was completely correct, or the assignment was done, just right, but it was more of a tactical, they didn't check this box or do this right. And I see where that's really is. I mean, exactly this. Forget about the creativity or how well we did that. It's that they didn't follow the rules or do the checkbox or sign their name in the right print or put the right date on there. And that's exactly what it sounds like this turns into. They're being more judged, encouraged to do the tedious things correctly more than they are in the creativity part of their work. Do you think that's really where this seed is planted, that may be stifling creativity or discouraging creativity?
I think you nailed it exactly. In fact, my daughter, who's very, smart at math, and she was in school when she was in second grade. She was given all of these arithmetic worksheets that she could easily solve, but sometimes she just wouldn't do it because she was so bored. And so she got marked down. And because she was being marked down on some of these, because she was bored, the teachers, they wouldn't let her go into the more advanced program. So it's like she was being penalized for being bored with doing the same stuff over and over. And what our schools often do is they prize us and reward us for being good form fillers, for being good repetitors, for being what I call robotic. It's like we want to create a nation of robots that can follow the rules exactly, which robots do very well. They follow the rules. But
BB
robots
stackers.
are not creative.
I call them BB stackers. They get a lot of activity with little results. By doing things. And the math is a perfect example. And I'm sure everybody, the first thing, as soon as you said math, what comes to so many people's head was, you didn't show your work. Exactly. Yeah, you got the answer right, but you got it wrong because you didn't show your work. And that's just that's just so incredible now to think about that, how this could be planted.
Oh, it is. I mean, because many people can actually intuit the answers to math problems in one way or another, and we don't exactly know the neuroscience of that, but people can intuit, and yet, and my daughter is, again, one of those, but they get penalized for doing the intuitive thing, and instead they have to spell out analytically following somebody else's procedure. Even if they got the right answer, if they're not showing that they followed the procedure that was specified to get the right answer, forget it. And I just wanted to say something, is that the higher in the education system you go, the worse this gets. And this is one of the reasons that I decided to leave that system, because as we train, for example, PhD students to get their PhD, or MD students, even there's more of this, most of it is about the memorization and the analytical thinking, and we give them so much of that the creativity increasingly gets shut down and trained out of them. So we're essentially training the imagination out of our future scientists, which is just, it's like so awful. It really pisses me off when I think about it.
Well, I think that's where, it comes in. And I think what you've done is define what that means when you rekindle and unleash the passion that people may have felt they had lost, or maybe weren't aware that they had there before. And you think about a lot of people that are in the field of science or in those types of science. You had talked to me prior to this about, the difference, the left brain and the right brain thinkers, and how, oftentimes people goes against logical thinking of which one of these would be the creative versus the productive, and that maybe that creativity is elusive to people that are analytical thinkers. Can you talk just a little bit about that and that misconception about who is creative and who isn't? You mentioned Steve Jobs and Albert Einstein, and probably people would, at first glance think of them as being the opposite of what they really are.
Yeah, so I think Albert Einstein is easiest to use as an example because of the many quotes where he specifically said that imagination is far more important than knowledge. And that was the principle upon which Einstein operated. His development of the theory, both the special and the general theory of relativity, came from imagination, not from memorization, not from knowledge, not from sitting there, crunching numbers somehow. The crunching numbers part was later. So he had the imagination, he had the ideas first, the creative spark, and then later he had to go write that down and present that to other human beings by cranking the numbers and coming up with all the math to support and justify his theories. But that was after the fact. It was after the original creative spark. Without the creative spark, none of that would have happened. And the same is true of, let's say, the iPhone, which I'm talking to you from. The iPhone, sure, there's a lot of analytical thinking that goes into building one of these things, but that wasn't the spark. The thing that brought the iPhone about, which revolutionized mobile devices everywhere, was the creative genius, the creative insight that said, let's make a phone in a new way that integrates things, that is so easy to use and so effortless, and that's just a natural part of your life. That is creativity at operation. And it's funny because so many parents I hear about talk to their kids as if, going into engineering or going into medicine or going into law, that these are sure thing careers. As long as you get those analytical skills and get the right knowledge, you will be a success. But the best scientists, the best lawyers, the best engineers are actually the ones sure, they have the analytical skills, but they also have that creative genius. They can build something new. If you think about another example is the Hoover Dam. When that was built, nobody had ever built an arch gravity dam of that form. They'd always been these big, bulky earthen dams that couldn't sustain as much height as they wanted for the Hoover Dam. So the engineer, John L. Savage, used his creativity combined with his engineering skills to come up with a new arch gravity design that allowed us to build a dam much more efficiently and much smaller, a tighter footprint, and with less materials to hold more water. And that's an example of a creative advance. And this is true across every field of human endeavor. It's not just analytical thinking. It's the creative thinking that really gives all fields the important spark. And yet we train that out of people instead of training it into people.
Yeah, no, it really is. I think it's the responsible, obviously, for some of the biggest human advancements that have ever been. And I'm glad to see, and I think what a lot of people are realizing listening to this is that it goes directly against a lot of the stereotypes when they're thinking of doctors or lawyers or scientists, that these are also the folks that have imagined and created some of the most incredible things that we've experienced through our lives. And I feel extremely fortunate that there are folks like you that can bring that out of people that may have felt that was beyond their reach or out of their realm, that you have certainly proven otherwise. One of the things I like to do, you're certainly an influencer. You've influenced not just scientists and people like that, but you've influenced far beyond that, because these folks are potential and, in fact, influencers themselves. So it can go a long way. What I like to find out is what influences the influencer. What is it that inspires you, that drives you, that influences you to do what you do, and even sees its way through your work that you do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I had to think about that for a moment. I'd say that probably the most important influence is two things. One is I do appreciate my scientific knowledge and training and background, and especially physics. Physics really opened my eyes to how complex our world actually is, especially at the quantum mechanical level, and just how amazing things are beyond the simple nature that we think. We might see a table in front of us and think that this is solid and real, but at the quantum level, it's far from this solid, real thing that we think it is. So I give a lot of credit to that education. And then later on in my life, I came across a set of books by Jane Roberts that were written in the name of an entity called Seth. And you'll just have to read the book to find out how that came about. But it's really interesting. And Seth describes exactly how a lot of this works at a much deeper level than even current physics can do. And so, for example, there's a book, The Nature of Personal Reality, that is just one of the most eye-opening books that I have ever read. And so I find a lot of inspiration in sort of combining what we know about physics and about the science with understanding how we can operate better and more happily and more fruitfully as human beings.
I've got to say that folks like you digging deep and uncovering and unfolding this into your work that allows it to benefit all of us is that's definitely one of the reasons that I consider you an influencer without a doubt. Morgan, how can folks find out more about what you're doing, see what you're involved in, and really realize that they do have some passion and creativity inside them, regardless of their field?
Sure. So you can check out my blog at morgangiddings.com, and I have occasional writings there on these topics. And I also have a place where you can opt in, put a name and email address in, and I'll send you a video about unleashing your creative genius and also send you my Poor Robot, Wealthy Human ebook, which is just really about the importance of getting out of that robotic mode we discussed earlier and why getting out of that will actually increase your wealth. That this is very important, especially for entrepreneurs, but even scientists. So that's one way to find out more about what I'm doing, and also look out for my new book that will be coming out in the next few weeks called Create or Die.
Create or Die. I love that. But yeah. Morgan, I want to thank you so much for coming on and explaining this in a way that a physics and biochemistry dunce like myself can understand and appreciate. It does mean a lot, and I think you've definitely opened up the eyes to a lot of our listeners.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Folks, take a look, morgangiddings.com. I think that you are going to really be fascinated by the possibilities out there of not only you, but also you may have family members that fit the mold of what we have been talking about today, and don't let this opportunity pass to discover more. So until next time, remember, you are the only true game changer. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/influencersradio.